The next morning when we woke, Ian informed us he had a plan and would like us to join him. He told us, while I'm here in India, I'm going to train to be a yoga master, and Sandy, a qualified teacher and guru, has agreed to lead me. It would be a shame to make this journey alone, so anyone who wants may join in. Sandy added, it will be less than half a day every day over the next month while you are here, and will involve mind and body exercises that will require hard work. We should still have time to complete our agenda in India and immerse ourselves in the culture of the area. Rick was the only one who opted out due to recent surgery, and he didn't feel it was something he wanted to do. He was happy to explore the local town while we trained. Then someone suggested that he have a go at finding the diaries. Now that we had that settled, Ian picked up the urn with Sir Malcolm's remains and said, let's get ready, those making the journey. And of course, everyone came. Paths seemed to run off in every direction in the forest. I was trying to watch where I was going as we descended, but it was dense and this was tiger country. We didn't hear any game or birds, which made it feel kind of eerie. 2 streams were crossed, or perhaps it was the same stream twice, it was hard to tell. Some great vistas overlooking the valleys in between appeared when the sun shone through the occasional crack in the canopy. The trees in this region of India included oak, chestnut, walnut, ash, rosa musk, Himalayan cypress, rhododendron, and pine. One tree that stood out amongst them all was the hill maple, a sacred tree whose bark was used to make tonics, stimulants, and blood purifiers. The flowers of the tree are dioecious, meaning individual flowers are either male or female. Perianth, the male flowers are bell-shaped and the female flowers are bluntly toothed. Their capsule encloses more than 100 seeds once they have swung each other's pendulums. The Neani lake has Hindu lore attached to it, like everything around here. It's believed that Shiva carried Sati's body around the universe before Vishnu cut her body into 52 parts with his Sudarshan chakra weapon. The body parts fell to earth to become sacred sites where all people can pay homage to the goddess. The lake is believed to be the place where Sati's eyes fell and came to be called Nainital, or Lake of the Eye. There's a belief that the lake goddess will claim one white person a year. Finally, we broke through the dense forest, and I saw the glade for the first time as it spread in front of us. The glade seemed suddenly cool from the breeze rather than warm from the sun as I stepped into it. We mingled around the bench and Ian reached into the bag he was carrying and pulled out the urn. Marius and Marion never met Sir Malcolm and Cheesy, and I only had last summer with him. Ian met him half a dozen times in this life, but Sandy spent his whole life with Sir Malcolm, so he gave the eulogy while Ian waited to disperse the ashes. You touched many lives, Sir Malcolm, including those who have made the journey here today and those who made your journey before you. Nobody has made a longer journey through more turbulent times, but your love for tigers and for this country sustained you through it. Be reborn here again as we let the wind carry you across the Indian soil. Then Ian released the contents of the urn just as a gust of wind came up and spread them across the entire glade. The walk back up the hill was much slower and even quieter as we reflected on what Sir Malcolm meant to each of us. When we reached the final slope, Rick came running out of the house and called us. The camera has caught something you won't believe. Quote. We all scrambled into the study to see the computer screens on the table, and specifically the one showing a tiger lying on its back in front of the bench in the glade we had just left. Less than half an hour ago we were there, and now it's the tiger and Sir Malcolm. The tiger appeared to roll around on the ground where Ian had released the ashes, and then it laid on its back again. She was saying goodbye. None of us had sufficient skills to determine the sex of the tiger. Eventually the tiger left on the same path it had arrived on, according to Rick. Then Rick added, even better news, I found some diaries in a secret hiding spot. Apparently, while looking around for the diaries, he knocked a picture off the wall, and when he tried to replace it, he realized there was a space behind the wall. Once he pried off the board, a pocket with 3 books revealed itself. He handed the books to Ian, who opened the first one and said, this is Lord Andrew's diary. They all are. Very interesting, let's sit down and read some. We all got beverages and sat around the table while Sandy and Ian took turns reading the diaries out loud. Sandy said, listen to this entry, a gang of killers set a village aflame today. I was told they hacked men, children and the aged to death, then carried off the young women to be raped. A journalist I had lunch with today, Anjit, told me the brutalities were much worse, and he saw pregnant women who had their breasts cut off and babies hacked out of their bellies, while infants were found roasted on spits. How do you not cry when you hear this? It doesn't matter which side of this dispute you are on, these are human beings. I talked with the magistrate, and he had knowledge of the man who started the trouble but could not prosecute. Could he have realized the force that he was to set in motion? I thought, what if he did have the knowledge to know what he was starting? Here's one that changed things, Ian said, and then continued, Suhrawardy, the Muslim League chief minister of Bengal, today said, bloodshed and disorder are not necessarily evil in themselves, if resorted to for a noble cause. The end never justifies the means, and only one who knows they're doing wrong will tell themselves that. He should have been brought to justice. Cheesy said. How does a system prosecute millions of people at once? Sandy interrupted. Here's an entry about a night that was described to him. A man was tied to the connector box of the tramlines with a small hole drilled in his skull so that he would die as slowly as possible. That same night a Hindu mob stripped a 14-year-old boy naked to confirm that he was circumcised, then threw him into a pond and held him down with bamboo poles. Ian read the next one. Today Nehru said, I want those who stand as an obstacle in our way should go their own way. What kind of a fool is he? How can Nehru throw gasoline on a fire and expect it to calm things down? India has always been tolerant of all religions. How has this become the defining issue? In another entry, he blamed Churchill. This is all Winston's doing. He made deals and now he has to deliver. To put out a flame of Quit India, he started a bonfire today. When he entered the war and dragged India into it, he needed the support of the Muslim League. Ian tried to clarify. I think what he's saying here is that when Churchill dragged India into the Second World War and Gandhi's Quit India plan was against him, the Muslim League supported him. Now he delivers Pakistan and Bangladesh as separate Muslim states. The same thing happened at the end of the war when he used religion to partition Palestine, or when the British partitioned Ireland 100 years ago. I interjected. Stalin must have got something out of that deal too. Marius said, I'll have Uncle Sandhu see if there's anything in the library from that period. You never know. Sandy continued, here's one. Cyril Radcliffe is a pompous twit. These borders are ridiculous. People moving both ways across the Punjab, why? What's he thinking? How do such incompetent people get put in charge? Rhetorical question. And later an entry says, at the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. But no name was noted as to who said that. Jawaharlal Nehru. Ian said, listen to this one. Foot caravans of refugees fleeing the violence stretched for 50 miles today. The passengers carried everything they owned, going to a place they had never been to find whatever is left there. As they went, mounted guerrillas burst out of the tall crops that lined the road and mowed them down like sheep. I'm looking for the names of those responsible for this, as it occurred very close to here. The magistrate is a man known to me. Cheesy said. What do you think he meant by that? And nobody wanted to say anything. His next entry read, refugee trains bursting with families and their belongings when they started out were attacked at every stop along the way. Less people got on at each stop and those on the train were dragged off and beaten to death. When the train came to the border it was dripping a trail of blood. When the doors were open it was revealed that everyone in the car had been hacked to death. Those responsible will relive that night. I swear to it. Quote. Marion asked, what's this partition he talks about? And Sandy replied, let's start that story with Mahatma Gandhi, because he was a big factor in partition and the Quit India campaign. Gandhi was actually a lawyer in South Africa before returning to India and adopting the loincloth as a symbol of his identification with India's poor in 1921. He fathered the non-cooperation movement with events like the collection of clothes to later be symbolically burned. Gandhi did this as a result of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, also known as the Amritsar massacre, that occurred a couple years earlier. A British Army officer named Dyer opened fire on an unarmed gathering of thousands of men, women, and children without warning. Dyer killed 379 people and wounded 1,100 more, but the Indian National Congress estimated 3 times the number died that day. He went on to say, they had the Round Table Conference on Peace and Gandhi was the sole representative of the Indian National Congress. Gandhi began his campaign of non-cooperation again, prompting Indians to return British awards and honours, to resign from civil services, and to boycott British goods. Ian said, Lord Andrew was around to witness this at a high enough level to be a significant player. Gandhi opened up membership in the Indian National Congress to everybody, even the poorest Indians. Then he halted the non-cooperation movement after the violent incident at Chowri Chora, where protesters participating in the non-cooperation movement clashed with police, who then opened fire. Demonstrators set fire to the police station, killing everyone inside. 3 civilian deaths and 22 policemen were killed in the melee that followed. They were Gandhi's people who committed the atrocity, and he could not support them anymore. Muslim leaders began to move away from Congress, which was under pressure from Hindu interest organizations not to make concessions to Muslim political demands. Ian said, Muslims didn't have the representation that their numbers supported to be called equal representation. Sandy said, yes, that's true. Muslim representation in future central government assemblies was reduced to a quarter, rather than a guaranteed third as demanded by Muslim political organizations. In the 1930s, Gandhi launched further All India civil disobedience campaigns based on full independence from British rule. A day of peaceful protest in Peshawar met with violence from the British military, resulting in over 200, mostly Muslim civilian deaths. India then instituted separate electorates for Hindus and Muslims, in which the Indian National Congress wins big and the Muslim League fares very badly. So badly, in fact, they didn't even hold power in any of the Muslim-majority provinces. Cheesy jumped in, "That's just not cricket," Sandy went on to say. In the 1940s, the British unilateral declaration of war on Germany on behalf of India created an anti-war stance with the Quit India campaign, leading to the arrest and imprisonment of Indian National Congress leaders. Jinnah and the Muslim League agreed to cooperate with the British government and support India's participation in the war while putting forward the two-nation theory and the idea of Pakistan, and as the eventual payoff by Winston Churchill. By 1945, the defeat of Churchill and the election of a Labour government together with Muslim election returns escalated riots and atrocities in northern and eastern India. This was an area of India that would have affected Lord Andrew greatly. Sir Malcolm would have been a young soldier by then, wouldn't he? To which Sandy replied, yes. Sandy said, Mountbatten, unprepared for the potential increased violence, advanced the timeline for partition to less than 6 months. Partition was seen as the only solution for both parties, so in June 1947, Viceroy Louis Mountbatten broadcasted a rushed and incoherent partition plan to Indians, announcing British withdrawal in just 2 months. That would have sent all the pendulums of India into rapid motion, I thought. People had to leave their homes and take their belongings on the journey, while other people were waiting to take what they left behind, including their homes. Many didn't wait for current residents to leave and beat him to death to be the first to get their belongings, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. Sandy composed himself and continued, the predominantly Hindu and Sikh areas were assigned to the new nation of India and predominantly Muslim areas to the new nation of Pakistan. The social ruptures and atrocities that accompanied the time-compressed partition plan were mind-boggling and particularly close to Lord Andrew. They were probably observed by a young Sir Malcolm in some form. Estimates say between 250,000 and 500,000 humans on both sides were brutally killed. The Indian National Congress went as high as 1,500,000. India and Pakistan were born out of profound mutual distrust and dislike thanks to the British belief that religious partitions are good. Just at that moment Dick yelled, "The tiger's back!" And we ran into the den to catch a glimpse of the computer screens. There it was standing in the middle of the glade looking into the camera. Then it laid down on the grass. Suddenly a second tiger entered the screen, and everyone gasped. Sandy said, 2 tigers together like that is rare. It must be a mother and daughter or twin brothers searching for new territory. Anything else and they should be fighting. The second tiger laid down beside the first and they seemed content. Dick said, I love this, it's incredible. I'm gonna watch this all night even if they leave. Rick added, I'll get us a couple beers and a couple of blankets. This is like when we were kids watching horror movies. Dick replied, yeah, but the beer had a root in it then. Eventually everyone else drifted off in the confidence they would be awakened for any new developments. Every day seemed to get more exciting. Sandy and Ian took volumes of the diaries to bed with them. Just before dawn Dick and Rick yelled out, hurry, come quick. The scene on the computer screen was not what I was expecting. 6 tigers were milling around in the glade. One tiger rubbed its face in the ground and then snarled at all the other tigers. They didn't seem offended. In fact, several others began exhibiting the same behavior as well, and we all thought we were going to have a massive tiger free-for-all. I'm sure if we send this file to any wildlife producer, they'd say this is never-before-seen behavior. David Attenborough would have this scene on every highlight disc he made ranked #1. What an unbelievable sight it was, and we watched mesmerized as the sun came up and the tigers slowly blended back into the forest. I asked, do you think those tigers were there yesterday when we walked down to the glade? No one wanted to answer that question, but I felt it was the smell of the ashes of Sir Malcolm that brought them out of the woods for their own farewell. It seems like when you spread Sir Malcolm's ashes in the wind and on the ground that the message went out in a wide area that Sir Malcolm was no more. These tigers came to pay their respects, I think, Rick said. He was becoming an expert on the area by taking long walks and engaging with locals he encountered. We ate our breakfast and watched for more developments while getting ready for our yoga journey to begin. Rick asked if I wanted to see Raj Bharwan Governor House. It was about a 3 kilometers walk each way along the lake and back. Cheesy wanted to come as well, so we got ready and picked up a stave each at the back door. They were sticks about 6 feet tall and quite sturdy. In addition to being great aids for hiking, they were also an important defense should we stumble into the path of a tiger. This is tiger country. We headed down the path to the road and I was a bit jittery to be honest, so I found my way into the middle of the group. They say you don't have to outrun the tiger, just the other people you're with. I should have picked a slower group. I'm looking a little bull-legged in this group. Rick was very comfortable in this new environment and seemed at ease, so took point in Dick's vernacular. He pointed out items of interest he had seen on other walks around town. It amazed me how you could be walking through a forest or desert or slum and then all of a sudden, a huge colonial structure pops out of nowhere with all its pomp and circumstance. The Raj Bharwan Governor House was such a building with square turrets, round turrets, columns, and arches. And of course, a long flat lawn that stretched to the forest edge. In better days there were probably peacocks roaming the grounds. The rain was again threatening, so we made haste back to Ian's place to begin our yoga session. Sandy had sent us background information to read before beginning our first session this morning so we could ask questions. When we got back, Sandy and Dick had laid out yoga mats for us all in a semicircle with Sandy's mat in the center. We all took our positions and did our best to sit properly, but looking back now it seems so ridiculous. Sandy began. Yoga became popular in the West when it was introduced by Swami Vivekananda in the United States. Outside India, yoga developed into a posture-based physical fitness, stress relief, and relaxation technique. Traditional Indian yoga includes physical exercise, meditation, and spirituality, to which Cheesy asked, "Have you practiced yoga for long?" And Sandy replied, "My mother would set me in yoga positions on a mat beside her as she baked the naan in the oven even before I could walk." Sandy went on, "Different yoga practices focus on different things which are all part of the whole. You'll find that there are many paths in yoga, but in the long run you can change the one you're on." And Marius noted, "No wonder Stairway to Heaven kept playing in my head while I was reading your notes." And everyone laughed. Sandy continued, "If you're not Hindu then yoga can still help you in your day-to-day life in many ways, but yoga is also a deeply spiritual pursuit for Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists. Hindus differ in their concept of God and whether he or she is in us all or a separate entity. The concept of inner self. The earliest evidence of a yoga tradition can be found in the Kesan hymn of the Rig Veda, a very early Hindu text. A person who follows the yoga philosophy with a high level of commitment is called a yogi, whether they are a man or a woman. They would be considered an extremely religious person by Western standards. The first known appearance of the word yoga defined it as the steady control of the senses, along with cessation of mental activity, leading to a supreme state. It's a union of physical, mental, and spiritual practices or disciplines. He stressed, different parts of human physiology are heightened. Breath control, for instance, is called pranayama and considered introspective. In Sanskrit, prana means vital life force, while yama means to gain control. Therefore, you must gain control of your vital life force. I think Dr. Emily would agree with that, Sandy predicted. What else must we master, Sandy G? Dick asked. The withdrawal of senses, which is called pratyahara. External stimuli that you would normally consume with your mind must be removed. Some people are very good at this, ignoring other people talking to them. Meditation is known as dhyana and it's all about concentration and focus. Mind concentration, another central factor, is known as dharana and means to hold, as if to hold or focus on a thought. This leads to philosophical inquiry and creative reasoning, which goes beyond conscious thinking and reasoning. Introspective analysis. And finally, the absorption of the spiritual union, which is known as samadhi. We'll come back to these later. There are many similarities with the training Marius and I experienced as children. Marian noted. There are 4 general paths of yoga that you can take: Karma Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. They are traditional yoga systems that include breathing exercises with asana or postures, chants, and meditation, which can reduce stress and improve immunity and lung functions. I thought, there are yoga systems within yoga systems, it seems. Each seems customized to suit a short-term purpose on a long-term journey. Sandy went on to say, yoga has its own focus on what's known to be true, which assumes concepts such as existence, being, becoming, and reality. It examines the fundamental nature of reality, like the relationship between mind and matter, substance and attribute, and potentiality and actuality. Purusha, which is self or pure consciousness, and prakriti, which is your human nature or primal instinct, are at loggerheads if your self is not aware of your nature. The lack of knowledge between a person's purusha and their prakriti is the source of the binding. To free yourself you must gain knowledge of that which binds you and identify within yourself what would be the source of your liberation. In the Amazon, the Indians take a drug called ayahuasca, which is made by heating or boiling the Banisteriopsis carpi vine combined with the leaves of the Psychotria viridis shrub. There are some modifications by specific tribes. But the active chemical is always the same, DMT or dimethyltryptamine. Marion told us and then continued after a short pause. DMT is a hallucinogenic tryptamine drug that produces effects similar to those of psychedelics, like LSD or magic mushrooms, but are much higher level. The Indians take it in an overnight ceremony to induce introspection. Non-Indians find introspection in this depth to be life-changing. Sandy said. That's exactly what this is, introspection. Understand your inner self. Guna's theory states that 3 gunas or innate tendencies are present in different proportions in all beings. These gunas produce a fundamental nature and psychological disposition for that being. Perhaps these are related to vital force, I thought. What would Tesla think? When sattva predominates in individual, the qualities of lucidity, wisdom, constructiveness, harmony, and peacefulness manifest themselves. Can you think of someone you know who exhibits those traits? When rajas are predominant, then expect attachment, craving, passion-driven activity, and restlessness to manifest themselves. When tamas predominates in an individual, then ignorance, delusion, destructive behavior, lethargy, and suffering manifest themselves. This is not the person you want to know and certainly not the one you want to be. Guna's theory underpins the philosophy of mind within the yoga school of Hinduism. Patanjali differs from the Samkhya school of yoga by incorporating Ishvara or a version of God. Hindu scholars have debated whom or what Ishvara is from defining him or her as a personal god with spiritual significance to the individual or self. Is that vague enough? Quote, is he Ngai? I wondered. It was a great first session and we were all looking forward to learning how to meditate and sit properly, but the background gave us some perspective to make this more than just an exercise journey. Perhaps it was being in India, but the spiritual nature of yoga appealed to me since I wasn't religious at all. For another hour we learned how to sit, focus, and block. After yoga, it was our intention to explore the town around the lake, but the rain set in and at that time of year Sandy told us it was very wet in this part of India, so we were to expect this and deal with it. Many shrines were located on the lake because of its sacred Hindu association. When the rain stopped, we grabbed walking staves by the back door and headed off to the Hanuman Gahi shrine, a 3-kilometer walk away. The shrine showed Hanuman ripping open his chest to reveal an image of Rama and Sita, which was a scene from the Ramayana. When we returned, it was time to watch the glade and listen to more of Lord Andrew and Lady Amanda's diaries. Sandy began with Lady Amanda's diary. I believe I left off in 1951. The next entry after that begins, Andrew has sent me to Hissa to engage several people with an offer of jobs in Nainital at Governor House. I am to locate Anupreet Deol, Jasnaif Kapoor and Lata Batra. Each will be offered 200 rupees to relocate to Nainital and begin work next month. After leaving Hissa I must travel to Bareilly, Aligarh and then on to Amritsar. A very long journey from start to finish. Many jobs are being offered. Ian interjected, it almost sounds like Lady Amanda was rounding up people and sending them here for some reason. I wonder who these people were. Sandy replied, there are maybe 20 entries like that over the next few months and even years with names, amounts, and locations. They weren't all sent to Nainital, there were several sent to Champawat, and quite a few went to Haldwani, both the towns which are not far from Nainital. Do her diaries end there? Marius asked. No, Sandy replied, she goes on to talk about Lord Andrew's mental and physical health deteriorating, but between her travelling and his travelling, they rarely spend time together until his death in 1955. Didn't Jim Corbett die in 1955? And Ian replied, yes. And I said, let me see if I can get more details on the web. When I found what I was looking for I said, this is unbelievable. Jim Corbett left for Kenya in November 1947. Just before partition, but at the start of the Big March. His citizenship was Indian because his life was so similar to Sir Malcolm's, having served in the military and being raised in India during those times. It continues to get more bizarre because Corbett also spent time in Haldwani, which came to be known as Corbett's village. Corbett and the villagers built a wall around the village to keep wild animals out of the homes. That's too many coincidences, don't you think? And everyone agreed. I continued, in Kenya, he lived in a cottage called Paxtu on the grounds of the Hotel Outspan, originally built for his Boy Scout leader, Lord Baden-Powell. This guy knew everyone, including royalty. Corbett spent the night in the branches of a giant ficus tree, as the bodyguard of Princess Elizabeth in 1952. That night, her father, King George VI died, and Elizabeth ascended to the throne. Dig jumped in with, here's a famous Corbett quote, for the first time in the history of the world, a young girl climbed into a tree one day a princess, and after having what she described as her most thrilling experience, she climbed down from the tree the next day a queen. God bless her. I finished, Corbett died in Kenya of a heart attack April 19, 1955. To which Ian added, Lord Andrew died on April 1, 1955. There has to be a connection with all this, it's too coincidental for me. Cheesy added, "It does defy logic, but so do many things in India. Maybe the answer is in the rest of Lord Andrew's diary or the secret Lady Amanda diary." The rain had stopped, so we decided we needed to get some fresh air. A walk down the hill and around the town should clear our heads. It was about 5 kilometers around the lake and back to the house, but the terrain certainly had an impact. Ian decided to stay and finish Lord Malcolm's diary and then help Rick search for any other diaries that could be coaxed out of their hiding places. An umbrella stand stood by the door and held a number of staves. Each staff was customized from a different local tree. They stood 2 meters high and were sanded, carved, and finished to a high luster. A bronze plate adorned each staff and provided the common name of the tree and the Latin name as well as complete species information. We stopped at the Sri Marnina Devi temple, which Sandy said was a site that Sir Malcolm had left a small stipend to. Other temples existed on the lake, such as the Passion Devi temple, the Sri Golu Devta temple, and the Shani Maharaj temple. There was even a temple in the middle of the lake. On our stroll back to the house, Cheesy said to Sandy, "There sure are a lot of ancient sites in India. It seems history goes back further here than almost anywhere in the world." Sandy replied, "Further. We don't have time on this visit to see some of the most amazing sites in the world like the Ellora Caves. They're over 1,000 kilometers away in Maharashtra. Ellora is one of the largest rock-cut Hindu temple cave complexes in the world, with 17 Hindu temples along with Buddhist and Jain caves as well. Cave 16, for instance, features the largest single monolithic rock excavation in the world called the Kailash Temple, a chariot-shaped monument dedicated to Lord Shiva. The Kailash Temple excavation has sculptures depicting gods and goddesses in major Hindu epics. There are more than 100 caves at the site. I can't possibly convey the scope of the sites with words. Someday we must travel there and I will be your guide. A common feature is a rock-cut lingam yoni at the core of the shrine, with each being surrounded by a space for circumambulation, or parikrama as it's known." Cheesy asked, "What does circumambulation mean?" And Sandy told him it was the ability to walk completely around a sacred idol. "No," he said, "what is a rock-cut lingam yoni?" "Oh yes, we have not mentioned lingam and yoni before. The lingam and yoni together symbolize the merging of microcosmos and macrocosmos, the divine eternal process of creation and regeneration, and the union of the feminine and the masculine that recreates all existence. In a nutshell, they are shaped like a penis and vagina to represent both earthly and divine existence," he said. The lingam represents Shiva, and the yoni represents goddess Shakti, who is energy, ability, strength, effort, power, capability, and the primordial cosmic energy which represents the dynamic forces of thought that move through the entire universe. Sandy added, "Is she the goddess of vital force and not Kali?" I wondered to myself, "How do you worship Shiva with the lingam and yoni?" asked Marius. Sandy answered, "The traditional lingam rituals in major Shiva temples include offerings of flowers, grass, dried rice, fruits, leaves, water, and a milk bath for the lingam. Hymns are chanted while devotees go into the sanctum for a peek at the deity, followed by a clockwise circumambulation of the sanctum." Then continued, "Getting back to the caves, Cave 21 has a number of unique pieces, such as those depicting the story of goddess Parvati's pursuit of Shiva. Carvings depict Parvati and Shiva at leisure, Parvati's wedding to Shiva, and Shiva dancing. There's a large display of the Sapta Matrika, the 7 mother goddesses of the Shakti tradition of Hinduism. These are all major players in the stories," Marius noted. "Shakti is important because she is her spouse's energy, and she has some significant goddesses in her portfolio due to relationships with almost all the gods. Shakti is Brahmani, who emerged from Brahma, Vaishnavi from Vishnu, Maheshwari from Shiva, Indrani from Indra, Kaumari from Skanda, Varahi from Varaha, and Chamunda from Devi. Never short of a job. There were a couple of others, Nrsimhi and Vinayaki, but they don't fit into the 7 mothers concept of Hinduism." Dick noted, "That's like a who's who of Hindu divinity. She's had more spouses than Jerry Lee Lewis." Sandy continued, "The entrance to Cave 21 is flanked by large sculptures of the goddesses Ganga and Yamuna, representing the 2 major Himalayan rivers and their significant contribution to Indian culture. They're flanked by Ganesh, our elephant god, and Shiva, whom you all know. Inside the temple are goddesses important to the Shakti tradition like Durga. Cave 16, known as the Kailasa Temple, is carved entirely out of a single rock. 3 million cubic feet of stone, weighing approximately 200,000 tons, had to be excavated. You cannot get your head around numbers like that and appreciate the human effort required to do that." Cheesy pretended to make a note, "I guess we'll just have to see them next time." The Ajanta caves are worth seeing as well. They're a Buddhist site, but they're an amazing visual with caves cut into the cliffs. I think you'll see that type of cave more in Nepal and China, where Buddhism has a very strong following. And of course, Tibet when separated from China. We've been focusing on Hinduism, but if you look at sites based on the history of India, you would see the Taj Mahal, the Amber Palace, the Golden Temple at Amritsar, and so many more. That's why some people come to India and never leave. That is India. We arrived back at the house near dusk and went to see if any tigers had been seen, but there were no sightings in our absence. As we sat down to dinner, Marius asked Sandy, "What's karma?" Sandy replied, "Karma is the result of a person's actions and can determine your reincarnation options." Is karma vital force? Can you measure a person's karma? I thought, then asked Sandy, "Do Hindus believe in reincarnation?" Quote, "Most Hindus believe humans are in a cycle of death and rebirth called samsara. When a person dies, their Atman is reborn in a different body." He said, which prompted Dick to ask, "What's Atman?" Sandy replied, "Hindus believe that Atman is the universal self of a person, just as Brahma is the underlying universe. A person's Atman either transmigrates to a new life or attains release. Release is known as moksha, and it's an escape from samsara, the continuous cycle of birth and rebirth. But where do you escape to? I thought. Brahma is in a divine existence, as I'll show you when we talk about the yugas, so he doesn't live on earth. Some believe rebirth happens directly at death, others believe that an Atman may exist in other realms awaiting rebirth. Hindus believe that an Atman may enter Swarg or Narak for a period before rebirth. A sort of good limbo and bad limbo, but neither a hell. Every time you educate us, Sandy, there are just more and more questions. What's Swarg or Narak? Asked Rick. Hinduism is complicated, I will admit. When souls can't move to higher levels, they get stuck in the lower levels of the realms of this earth. The stage that is present here is known as Narak. Do good deeds and move to Swarg. When I have a chance to explain the yugas to you, it will modify that concept somewhat. Are we living in Narak in this realm? I wondered. Sandy resumed his talk about Atman and told us, karma, as the sum of your intentional actions determines your Atman's rebirthing options. If the Atman cannot be reborn into a higher form because of bad karma, it must reside in another form within this realm, such as an animal. If successful, and you reach moksha, the Atman becomes absorbed by Brahman, where each Atman is believed to originate. Other Hindu scriptures describe moksha as living in the realm of a personal god. I'll let you know which is true when I achieve it. Marius informed us. I can see it now. I collect vital force, do no evil, and then send my Atman to live in the divine realm with Brahma, Ingai and the other gods from all the various religions. I thought to myself and smiled. Ian asked, "Why are you smiling like the Cheshire Cat?" So I told them what I was thinking, and an audible gasp went around the room. Rick, Marius, and Marian had not been to Africa, so cheesy filled them in. It gave us all food for thought as we drifted off that night.